everyone, it's me, Dylan Spicer, here to talk to you again about another lovely film. One film I think that's come out recently that hasn't really had the credit that it deserves is Peter Jackson's King Kong. It made a lot of money when it first came out of the box office, but I kind of feel since then it's been disregarded in cinema history. And I think that's a real shame because you've got some excellent cinematography, some really interesting direction, some great action sequences, and even people like Jack Black pull off some great performances. But I've found out something recently which I'm going to have to share with the world, that actually King Kong isn't an original idea. King Kong is actually a remake of a film that came before. Now I know Peter Jackson fans out there might be getting a bit annoyed for me having a go and saying he's not original, but honestly I've done some research and it turns out that there was actually a film called Mulholland Drive that came out a few years earlier that King Kong is a rip-off of. Now, where am I going to start this accusation from? Well, obviously the first piece of information is that Naomi Watts is the main character in both films, and if you look about what the narrative strands do in these movies, they're basically achieving the same thing. Now, admittedly, Peter Jackson and David Lynch are very different directors. Like, Peter Jackson's very much more action-orientated, and David Lynch is much more about, like, I don't know, putting clowns in coffee or something, but like, when you actually look at it, it's basically the same. So, what are these fantasy worlds actually like? Well, let's start with Mulholland Drive. You have the two different kinds of worlds in Mulholland Drive. You have this weird, bright Hollywood land which Naomi Watts creates, and it's very different to the dark, seedy world of reality. And you can just see the differences in all of them. There's all these weird anecdotes about kangaroos, and there's all these kind of massive fat gangsters and weird looking people, and all these gangsters who just aren't sitting in chairs. They either sit in chairs and don't like coffee, or stand up. That's the two types of gangsters that live in the Hollywood land that David Lynch creates. It doesn't even make any sense. They're two personalities. A, they're gangsters and they can afford chairs. And B, they are gangsters and they don't worry about coffee. That's why they're gangsters. So that's like a crucial thing. It's not really a crucial thing. So what's that like when compared to King Kong? We've got the two sides of it. We've got the recession-driven New York full of gritty streets, and even though there's this kind of vague Hollywood glamour, there's this dark underside with Naomi Watts' theatre company breaking down. And then we have all the strange stuff like Skull Island, all the natives that seem to live there without food, and all these weird things like dinosaurs, which just simply don't exist. I think the most inventive part of Jackson's film is that he takes the Lynchian monster that you find behind the bin and turns it into this huge giant monkey. It's a very inventive idea, I'll give him that, but these two are clearly the same character. I've already mentioned that Watts is the main role in both films, but the similarities go far beyond that. In Mulholland Drive and King Kong, we both have a brunette as her love interest. It's maybe a female or a male, but it's clearly the same characters. They both kind of hang around in the background with not that much to do. They pop out of nowhere at certain moments, either under a table or just somehow climbing up the Empire State Building, like that's going to happen. Obviously not. In both films there's a director who gets their comeuppance. Justin Theroux in the reality of the film gets off with Naomi Watts' girlfriend, and in the fantasy world his life is ruined by gangsters and his wife cheats on him, all that kind of stuff. Whereas in the reality world of King Kong, Watts is disregarded by directors, where she suddenly imagines this Jack Black character who sweeps her away and takes her to his island, but it's his egotism that stops her getting the final parts, and he is finally punished by his big monkey dying. And in both films, we also have what I can only describe as a kooky gang. In King Kong, we have this weird group of men who are just sailors and actors that surround her at all times, and they're far too stereotypical to be real. And in Mulholland Drive, we have these strange characters like her landlord, the gangsters, all those kind of people. There's just a weird bunch in the fantasy world. When we cut back to reality, we see it's just normal people living their lives, nothing like the flamboyant characters that we've met earlier. And in both films you have this weird thing that happens when reality starts blending into the fantasy. In King Kong, there's these weird shots where everything starts going like that when they talk about Skull Island. There is clearly reality just trying to claw its way back into this life. And in Mulholland... what was it, Mulholland Drive? Oh, and in Mulholland Drive, sometimes Naomi Watts gets this strange expression on her face when she sees people from her life. It's best demonstrated when she sees Justin Theroux's character for the first time, and her face drops for no real reason. So, I think by now I've definitely shown that King Kong is a remake of Mulholland Drive, but I'm guessing there's a few people out there who think this is still just some kind of weird theory I've come up with. So I'm just going to pick out a few more factors to show you why King Kong is definitely a remake of Mulholland Drive. The first piece of evidence that in many ways Peter Jackson actually only makes a very brief part of Mulholland Drive distilled over 2.5 hours. In one scene, a man talks to his psychologist about how he's really scared that there's a monster outside a bin. The psychologist doesn't believe him. They go outside and find the monster near the bin. In King Kong, Jack Black thinks there's a giant monkey on an island for no reason at all, and yet when they go there, there's a giant monkey on the island. These are clearly the same things. Number 2, at the end of King Kong, Kong is in chains in a theatre. He breaks out and causes a massive amount of chaos, and this is clearly fantasy attacking New York. At the end of Mulholland Drive, which also takes place in a theatre, an imaginary band starts playing, and this is the moment where fantasy bleeds back into reality. It's interesting that Jackson chose to flip this scene, and yet at the same time these are clearly both the same scenes remade. Number 3. Peter Jackson made the film Meet the Feebles, which is honestly the most nightmarish thing I've ever seen in my life. If you think Peter Jackson is a narrative-based director, watch Meet the Feebles. It is a nightmare. Like, obviously there's a character element to what I'm doing now, but this is the real Dylan, alright? Do not watch that film if you were in any way scared of anything. It is honestly a horrible nightmare that will haunt you for the rest of your days. At the very least, Jackson is a director who is disturbed as Lynch, and maybe even, if we were to echo far back enough, Mulholland Drive might even be a remake of Meet the Feebles, which in turn is then a remake of King Kong. Maybe I haven't pushed this far enough. Peter Jackson is a nutter. And this is my final piece of evidence, alright? I genuinely think this is the one that proves categorically and emphatically that King Kong is a remake of Mulholland Drive. At the end of Mulholland Drive, the thing that stops fantasy happening is a key. In King Kong, the thing that stops reality happening is a monkey. In Mulholland Drive, Naomi Watts' fantasy world collapses and she kills herself. Hollywood kills her, and this is clearly a response from Lynch to his treatment when he made the film Dune. Lynch was notoriously unhappy with how the Hollywood system treated his work, and here he's proving that point to the world. He's saying, don't go to Hollywood. Hollywood will ruin your dreams. If you take a fantasy world of Hollywood as this amazing glamorous place, it will be destroyed by that Hollywood. Literally, a monster rises up over the city at the end of the film and goes, bang, done. Job done. Don't go to Hollywood. And that's what he's saying here. He's saying, don't go to Hollywood. It is not the glamorous place you think it is. It will ruin you. And Peter Jackson is going, no. Because what Peter Jackson does at the end of King Kong is literally be one of the actors in a plane shooting a monkey off the top of a building. Shoots a monkey in the face. And by shooting that monkey in the face, he is saying, there is a place in this world for Hollywood. Because he's just come up with this amazing original idea called Lord of the Rings, alright? If you come up with a fantastic idea of a man dropping a ring in a big volcano, Hollywood can achieve that for you. He's saying, no, David Lynch, you're wrong. It's your fault. He shoots the monkey off at the end, and he is going there. It's David Lynch, you're wrong. Just shoot the monkey of paranoia off your dream. Destroy your reality and create this amazing fantasy land, and you can come up with something as original as Lord of the Rings. And that's why Peter Jackson remade Mulholland Drive. I've just remembered there's a film from the 30s called King Kong. It was probably a remake of that instead. Bollocks.